Still using ChatGPT Text Summarizer? You can build your own instead of relying on ChatGPT. In this video, I will show you how to create a full-stack summarization app using Angular 20, Express.js, and OpenAI's transformer model. Welcome to Code with Shaz. Let me show you how the Express backend API connects with the Angular frontend, how the text flows through the model, and we'll build it step by step together. Stick around. By the end, you will have your own working text summarization app. So let's talk about architecture and the workflow. For the architecture perspective, we're going to be using Angular 20 frontend. We're going to be using Express.js API, and API is going to have an endpoint called summarize, which will send the text to OpenAI API. A user is going to be either pasting or entering an article text, and there will be a summarize button, and the user will click the summarize button from the front end. It will send the article text for summarization to the API. API will have an endpoint, and endpoint will send the request to OpenAI API for summarization. And once it's processed the result, it will return the summary text, and the summary text will be returned back to our endpoint, and endpoint will return the summary result back to our front end, and will display the result as a div, and then we'll display this to the user. So if you want to see this is the workflow and the architecture. Let's take a look at the front end. This is roughly what we're going to do. We're going to paste our article text here and click the summarize button. We'll go to open API and the endpoint and process the result and display into the summary text here. And if the user hits a clear button, the clear button will clear the text from our text area here and from the div. So there you have it. We have the architecture of the application now, and we know the workflow. So let's start building. Let's start with our backend project first. The backend is going to be Express.js. So for this, I have created a folder called C project summarize AI. So let's start with the command terminal. We're going to use PowerShell here, and if I do pwd, see I'm in summarize AI folder. I'm going to make a directory called backend, and let me cd into it, and then I'm going to be opening this with code. So once code is open, we're going to be installing some libraries in it. You can see that I am in Visual Code and I'm in the backend project. So let's open the new terminal, and I'm going to create. Let's do npm init -y. We're going to create our package.json file this way. So npm is Node Package Manager. Basically, you can use this to install Node.js and other JavaScript libraries. So let's create our other that we need. So basically, as you can see, I have my package.json file here. Start with index.js. Let me install some libraries. So what we're going to need, we're going to be using Express, and we're going to be using cores. We need cores because it's going to be running on two different ports, our backend and front end. So we need to install our cores library. And then I'm going to use .env because I'm going to use environment file to have our keys stored. And now let me install body parser because we need to parse the JSON data. I'm going to use body parser library for this, and I'm going to install OpenAI. So once everything is installed, this will take maybe a few seconds. So our libraries are installed. You can see here we have body parser 2.2, we have cores, dot and env, Express, and OpenAI. So let me install one more library. I'm going to install something called Nodemon because we want to make sure that every time we run it, we don't have to restart and whenever we make any changes. So this will help us with that. So I'm going to use Nodemon. So Nodemon install, you can see here. I'm just going to be installing it as a dev dependency because I don't want to install it globally. So you can see we just need to run the project. We don't need it once we are in production. So I'm going to install the Nodemon as a dev dependency. And then let me create our file. So I'm going to call it server.js. This will serve our API, and I'm going to come back to package.json, and instead of index, I'm going to call it server.js, and I'm going to change this. And instead of using test here, I'm going to use a startup script so to run our server file. So let's do this. So we don't need the comma there. Everything is ready. Let me go back to server and let me do a console.log just to make sure everything is working. I'm just going to print I'm going to just print hello or to make sure everything is done. Okay, so let me just start nodemon server.js. Let me first clear, make sure everything is working fine. So server.js. So let's, oh, sorry, I need to install with nodemon. Let me clear this again. Nodemon server.js. So you can see our application is running, our backend is running with the server.js, and we printed hello world. So now let's install our env file. So basically I'm going to go here. I'm going to create a new file called env, and env file, I'm going to be creating two, basically two keys here. One is going to be port. So the port is going to be 5000. Basically I'm going to be running there, and I'm going to create one more key called open API key, and I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to create your open API key, and I'm going to be replacing this soon. So this is our environment file, and we're going to use .env to read this. So create our open API key. You have to go to the site called, let me push it here, platform.openai.com/API keys. You see I have created already my summarize key. This is the one I'm going to be using. And you can also go there and you can create your own API key. So I'm going to toggle this. Let me add my open API key that I had already used. So I'm going to be copy pasting some stuff here. Let me close this, and let's toggle it. Make sure you guys don't see it. So now I have my port and my open API key. They are all set up. So let's go back to the server and let's start coding this thing. So first, let me import some libraries here. So I'm going to importing express.env cores of OpenAPI and body parser. Let me just snooze the Copilot because I don't want to use it. So let me start creating some code. So we're going to first say .env.config. So this will give us all our configuration stuff that we need. Then we're going to be creating a const app equal to express. Then let's say constant port equal to, so process env dot port, or not, we don't use a, we use from environment, we're going to provide our own, or we're going to use same thing, 5000. So this is going to be constant. Okay, so let's first use cores. We're going to use app.use cores, and the second one will be app.use body parser .json. So this is our main API setup, and let's make sure our is running. So I'm just going to copy this code here. So this will say, okay, we are using our Express app is listening on port 5000, and we're going to be running this one. So let me just remove this one at the moment. We don't need this. Let me run our project again. So I'm going to say nodemon server.js, and you can see that our application is running on this port. If you click on it, you can see that cannot get error, but the application is running on this one. So let's now start coding our API, open API stuff. So basically, I'm going to copy this code here. This is going to be, this code is going to be reading our open API key from the environment file we created, and it's going to be stored in open API. So I'm going to be running some code here. Basically, I'm going to copy paste it and I'll explain to you. I don't want to write the whole thing. Code creates a new endpoint called summarize, and basically what it does, it does a post, and you can see that request from the body, whatever we type from the body is going to be a text, and it's going to be in a JSON format. And if we don't provide any text, so it's null, it's going to say, okay, text is required. So it's going to throw a 400 error, and it's going to say text is required. So once we provide our text, then it's going to go to the open API, and the API is going to use model GPT-4 or mini, and we're going to have two things provided to the model. We're going to have a role which is called system. It says you are a text summarization assistant, and role is going to be user, summarize this text. So we're going to summarize this text this way. So once we get the response back, the response is going to be, we're going to trim the response. It's going to be put into a summary, and then if everything goes well, we're going to have a field called summary, and everything is going to be, our summarized text is going to be stored here. If there is any error, it's going to say, it's going to go to catch block and it's going to say error summarizing the stuff, and it's going to say fail to summarize. So that's the code basically. Very simple code, nothing complicated here. You can see that Ghost makes a call to OpenAPI, sends a request. If it's empty, give us 400 error. If not empty, then it gives us back our response and our summary text. So next we're going to be testing this in Postman. So we can do a small test here with this code to make sure that the API key we entered in the environment file is being loaded. And if it returns false, it means our API key is not being loaded. If it is true, so you can see it prints true, which means that our process is reading the Open API key we entered from the environment file. So now let's test this API to make sure it's working. We get a response back from Open API. For this, I'm going to use Postman, and if you can see here in the Postman, I have already did a post. So basically, I'm copying the text from our from the URL we posted. This is the URL we posted, and then the endpoint is summarize. If I go back to the summarize server.js, you can see that it's supposed to be summarized. So in the end, I'm going to add summarize here. So in the Postman, I'm going to be in the headers, I'm going to be adding one key. I'm going to content type is going to be application JSON, because I'm going to be sending JSON data and getting the response back in JSON as well. In the body, I'm going to be, this is my text basically that I am going to be summarizing, and I'm going to be pushing this into a JSON variable called text. This is what we're going to be sending it, and the rest is, you can see is a post and this endpoint. So I'm going to send the request back. So it's going to go to OpenAPI. I'm going to read my key. And as you can see that I get a response back that you can see this text is quite long, and it gives me a summarization of the text. If I send it, I don't know how many words it is, but you can see I get a 200 OK response. And let me send this back, this again. And you see I get a different text now. And every time it's going to be using different text, but it's going to be in the shorter format. So basically we send it to this format and we get response back. So our Postman is good, and our API key is working, and our response, we are getting a response back. So our backend is done. For front end, we're going to be using Angular 20. So let me see which Angular version I'm using. You can also use this command. Let me open a new terminal, and I'm going to be in the folder backend. So let me go back one folder. We are in our main summarize AI folder, and let me issue this command ng version. And you can see Angular CLI, I'm using the Angular 20.1.6, and node version is 22.17.1. So as of this recording today, the latest Angular is 20.1.6. So that's what I'm going to be using. And if you don't have any Angular, so the way you can install it, you can issue this command. Let me clear it. You can issue this command npm install -g. It will be installed globally. Angular CLI latest. So we'll get the latest CLI of Angular. Since I've already installed it, I'm not going to do this. So I have already version 20.1.6 as I indicated earlier. So let me now create a new application. I'm going to be creating a new directory, mkdir front end, and let me clear this up. I'm issuing a command ng new front end, and the styling I'm going to use CSS. And I'm going to be not using any routing, so I'm going to just say routing equal to false. This will install our new application front end. So it's saying that you're going to be using SSG to render. I'm just going to say no. And you want to use zoneless application. I'm just going to say yes. This is a new function that Angular 20 added, which is great. You should install that one. Right now I think it's beta testing, but you should also install that one. So it's installing all the npm packages for us. So let me cd into it, cd front end. And if I cd pwd, you can see that I'm in my front end right now. So what I'm going to do, you can see I'm in backend, but I installed my front end. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to be opening my new folder back into this summarize AI. So I'm going to be using, let's open with code. So here you can see both backend and front-end application at the same time. So you can see now I have my backend, which is the Express backend, and we have front-end application here. So let's go back to the front end, and I'm going to open a new terminal here. In the terminal, I'm going to be adding one library called Axios. So I'm going to be going to front end and then installing npm install Axios library. So we're using Axios instead of Fetch or HTTP because it automatically handles JSON request responses conversions. It supports request cancellation, interceptors, and better error handling. Works in both browser and Node.js. So our front-end app is ready, and you can see that I have Angular 20 running here, and you can see here I have app folder. Inside app folder, I have app HTML and the app TS. This is the one we're going to be working with, and so basically I'm going to be importing a couple of libraries here. Component Signal. Signal is a new library we're going to be using. This is in Angular 20. It makes it much easier to set and get your variables. And you can see I'm using Axios library here. So in the app HTML, I have the old, let me run this code just to see. So I'm going to say ng serve. And this is going to be running our application just to test to make sure everything is running. So I'm running at 4200 port. Let me open this up. And you can see that this is our application. You can see this is Angular 20 CLI, and this Angular 20 front end is running with the 20 UI. So let me just start writing the code. So first we're gonna remove this test file. We're not testing anything here. I'm just gonna remove this. So you can see I have my app.ts file, and in the file I'm gonna write some code. So first I'm gonna be importing our Axios library here, and Axios is so I'm gonna just make sure that the Copilot is turned off. We're using text signal equal to signal, and it's going to be an empty string. So basically you can see here, if I override it, so signal signal is basically our string that is Angular 20 feature that will allow us to set and get our variables from and to the response. So next one is going to be our summary signal equal to signal. Same thing, we're going to declare an empty string here, and then why it keeps writing signal, so I'm going to be signal. So let me write the main function. I'm going to be using a sync function here, summarize, and then this, and then what we're going to do, I'm going to write some code here just to show you how it's going to work. So first what we're going to do is that we're gonna be adding our text signal from the UI into the variable called text signal. If it is empty, then if we're gonna say, okay, please enter some text, and we're gonna return it, and nothing will happen, and it will return the response to the user to enter some text. So let me put our post code here. So for example, what it's doing here is basically calling is sending the JSON object with a property called text, and this is the value that we get from the UI. So we're going to be setting text signal in the UI in the text area field. So what it does so basically what post does, post sends a request and returns a promise back to our request. So for example, if the promise is resolved, then it does an await, and it puts our response result into our field called res. So in once we get the result back, then basically we get the data from the response. We get the data we get, which is a summary information that we passing in. It gets back to our summary signal, which we set here in our variable. So this is how the whole workflow flows. And then if you get any error, then error is going to be caught, and it's going to say error summarizing text. Error could be anything. Either the Open API is not responding, our key is not working, whatever the reason could be. But this is how basically it is done. So in the end, what the code is doing is that it's sending a request, uses text to the backend in Summarize API. Requests that we already created. It waits until the summary comes back, and then which is a promise here, and then sends the request and stores the result back into our res in the res which variable we created, which is the response that we get. So this is how basically the code is working. And in the end, let's say if I want to clear our text, so let's say if you want to do another response, we can create a function called clear here. And in the clear, what we'll do, we're going to be basically setting these two things to empty string, so that one user can post another request, and and then this way we can keep on responding to the server. So let's replace our app HTML, that is the default Angular. Let me copy this cut this code and paste it with our code that we're going to be using. So in this, you can see that I created a div. Div has a display flags, and we're going to use some padding and gap between them. I'll show you when we get the UI. So we're going to be creating a text area. Text area basically is going to have a value called text signal, and it's going to have an input value. So let's talk about these two, what they do exactly. So if you look at a values text signal is a variable we created in our app TS, which is text signal, which is a signal of, it's a new Angular 20. I think it was done in Angular 16 and above. It basically says create a signal that can be set or updated out directly. So what basically it does, it pushes the data from signal to the input box that the value is in. Takes the data from a signal and push into the input box. That's what it does. So for example, if the input box will always display whatever is in the text signal. So if you reset the signal elsewhere, the input box updates it automatically. So for example, you have used this text signal somewhere else and it gets updated, then the input box will always take that and update based on whatever change you have done already. And this one basically it's an input. So what this does, it pushes data from the input box back to the signal. So the effect of this one is that whenever the user types, the signal is updated with the latest input text. So for this one, whenever the user types in the input field, it takes the current text value and stores into the text signal. So that's the function of this one, these two fields. And you can see the placeholders enter paragraph and text area. So here I'm using another div, and I'm using a button, and I'm calling my summarize function that we have created already. And then this is where we clear everything up. And if you see at the bottom, we create another div. This is another flag. So basically, and then once we click it, and whatever was pushed to the summary signal in our FTS, which is here, if you can see here, it gets set here. Whatever we push to summary signal, it will be picked up by this call of signal. You can see that this is also a signal, and it will grab the data from there. Okay, so good. So let me run this up now. Let me go back to our application, and you can see it's already updated. So basically what is happening here, I have my div that I created where I'm going to be entering my text, and I'm going to have two buttons, summarize, clear, and this is where everything is going to be posted. So now let me test this up. So for testing, I'm going to be entering some text. You can see it's a long text. It has like few lines of paragraph, and we can see, let me send the summarized text to this, and then right now okay, it says error summarizing text, or something happened. Let me see what's the error. Let me go to the inspect console.log, and let's see what happens. There's an Axios error is happening. Looks like the connection is refused, and it's 27. So let's see what is the problem here. I think the problem is our application is not running. That let me go back to the backend application and run again. So let me go to I've done a new PowerShell script here. Let me cd into our backend, and then I'm going to be using, let's say, nodemon server.js, and I'm going to be starting. So I think now the application is started again. Let me go back to our UI and see if it's working now. So I have my same text, and let me clear the console here, and then we'll start typing it again. Okay, console, and let me clear it up, and then let me send it back again. So this time, let's see. Okay, so this time we got the response back. You can see that our text was summarized here. This is the summary that was sent back from our summarized endpoint. It goes to OpenAPI with our key and sends the data back as a shorter response. So let me summarize, send one more time, and let's see. So you see we get another response. But there's a problem here. Whenever you click summarize, it seems like nothing is happening and like it's not doing anything. So I think we need some kind of loading indicator here. So let's take a look how we can do that. So let me go back to our application that we had done already. I'm going to be adding a couple of modifications here in the code. So first we're going to do is that I'm going to be adding something called let's add let's add loading signal here. So let's go there, and then let's see, we're going to add this start loading. No, sorry, let me create first loading signal. Let me put it to false, and then let me put this to this start loading. No, sorry, I think we should do this around here, this part, once the user starts the application there. So once we have our loading signal, we're going to be using here we put this to set to true, because at this point when we get the response back from the when the text is not empty or anything, it means the user had entered something. Here we start loading signal, and this is the point where we're going to be using it. And then let's do another finally, and in the finally block, once we finally will run, I don't think we need this one. Even if I would try and catch there's an issue, is the finally will always run. So let's put here in the finally, I'm going to put it back to false, set to false, and this way we're going to make sure that once everything is done, we put it back to the false. So let me go to the HTML and see how we can do this. In the HTML, we can see here I have summarize here. So let me change this to Angular style double brackets here. So let's see, I'm going to be calling loading signal that we created already. If the loading signal is good, we are true, then I'm going to be calling loading. And then if it is false, then let's push to that, let's call it summarize. So basically that's how we're going to do it. So in the end, what we did is that we created one loading signal variable here. And then here, once the user enters some text, we push it to true. And then in the finally, we push it back to false, which means that while we are sending the request to the server, to OpenAPI, we're going to be using true. And if it is sent back, then we push to false. And our API HTML, you can see that while it's loading, you're going to be indicating loading. And once it's finished, we're going to be summarize. So let's go back to UI and test it out. Let me go to UI. Let me close this one. Let me just refresh one time. I'm going to posting my paragraph again. So let's push our paragraph again and let's see. So you see now, while we are sending response back to the server, we have a loading indicator, means we are doing something, and somebody gets the response back. Let me do one more time. You can see we are loading it and then we get a response back. So there you have it. So our front end is working, our back end is working. We have a full application which goes to the OpenAPI, and using the transformer model, it sends our paragraph, and then the response we get back is a shorter version, a summarized version of response. And we just built a working full stack application using Angular and Express.js. What I love about this project is that you see both sides, the concept of transformers and the practical code that makes it work. If you found this helpful, please make sure to subscribe my channel Code with Shaz and hit the like button. Thanks for watching. Let's keep building, keep learning, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.